They shouted in his face as if he were society's burden. They threw scornful glares, as if an older man fumbling with his shoes offended their rush. No one knew. In mere seconds, a small piece of metal from his coat pocket would silence the entire airport, and a story buried for nearly 2 decades would force them all to bow their heads. That morning, Denver International Airport pulsed with its familiar frenzy. Loudspeakers droned flight calls, footsteps hurried, eyes glued to phones, suitcases scraped the stone floor. At Security Checkpoint 4, the line stretched long, time crawling slower than elsewhere. No one spoke. Only impatience and sighs filled the air. Then he appeared. A stooped figure in a heavy gray coat, old shoes worn silver thin, white hair is sparse, face etched with wrinkles and eyes, searching for something amid the sea of strangers. In his right hand, a small, faded satchel weathered as if it had trailed him through a lifetime. He glanced up at the signs, his blurred vision struggling to read. When his turn came, he bent to unbuckle his belt, shedding layers of clothing, then his shoes. Each move is slow, deliberate, as if peeling away a past piece by piece. The crowd behind began to mutter. A tall security agent with sunglasses on indoors stepped forward and voiced sharply, "Sir, push the tray through. Empty all bags. The one in your chest. 2. The old man turned, eyes confused, his left ear, perhaps deaf, caught little. He bowed his head, fumbling in his coat pocket with trembling hands. "Hurry up, please," a young man behind snapped, pulling out his phone to film, muttering, "Why's this geezer even flying?" The old man persisted, patient, removing his final coat and placing the satchel on the conveyor. A shrill beep pierced the air. Red lights flashed a warning no one understood. A nearby officer approached, signaling a hold. "Any metal on you?" The old man nodded faintly. Without a word, he reached into his chest pocket, pulling out a worn paracord lanyard. Dangling from it is a tarnished metal tag. He placed it gently on the tray. No one cared. No one looked closely. Some whispered, probably flashing his old soldier card for priority. A woman tisked old and slow, acting like we all owe him. The officer glanced at the tag, missing the faded inscription, dismissing it. Just an old man, a cord, a meaningless trinket, but he didn't react, didn't resist, didn't explain. He only stared at that small metal piece as if it held the last remnant of something vast, forgotten by those around him, perhaps never known. Only when a duty officer's gaze chanced upon the faint inscription did everything shift. At that moment, the security hall would cease to be a place of baggage checks. It would become a stage for a forgotten legend, stepping forth from silence. Soon after, he was ushered into a private screening room. No apology, no questions. The room was stark, its flickering fluorescent light glinting off his trembling hands on the icy metal table. Each tug of his satchel's zipper echoed dryly in the silent space. A TSA agent entered, young. Her badge read Clara, a trainee, still learning, and perhaps because of that, the only one that day who didn't look at him with scorn or impatience. She worked methodically, following protocol, but with a gentleness none others showed. She removed each item from his bag, a worn leather notebook, a faded pillbox, and a neatly folded handkerchief. And finally, the paracord lanyard with the military tag he'd placed on the tray outside. Clara lifted it, intending to set it aside like any mundane item. But then, a stray beam of light caught the metal, revealing faint etchings. She froze, turned it over. Her eyes traced the inscription slowly, halting at the 2nd Battalion, Fallujah, Operation Phantom Fury. She swallowed hard. Fallujah. She'd heard that name not from textbooks, but from her father's late-night silences by the window, recounting a distant war, a place where hundreds of American soldiers fell, where her father nearly didn't return, had a combat medic not carried him through rubble in the dark. Clara drew a deep breath. Her hands, holding the tag, no longer shook from procedural nerves but from something else. She quietly opened the inner lining of his coat pocket. There, taped with brittle brown adhesive, was an old photo. In it, he stood behind a group of Marines, shirt blood-soaked, cradling an unconscious young soldier. His face was taut, but his eyes burned with resolve. Scrawled on the edge, faded ink smudged by water. To the man who carried us out, we never forgot. Semper Fi. Clara couldn't look away. She stared at the man the airport had just berated, rushed, filmed for mockery. The man they deemed a doddering nuisance was the reason part of her father's unit survived to come home. No medals, no uniform, no boasts, no one recognized him, and he never asked them to. He moved through their lives a shadow, carrying a memory he never shared, a soldier living silently, keeping only what was most sacred in silence. As Harold stepped out of the screening room, the air outside crackled with tension, thicker than when he'd entered. The crowd lingered, their eyes sharper with impatience and suspicion. Another security agent, not Clara, approached, face hard as stone, voice gruff. "You're detained for non-compliance." Without waiting for a response, he rifled through Harold's coat again, though nothing remained to search. The mob raised phones anew. A woman snickered, dressing like that and playing veteran. Probably printed that tag yesterday. Another spoke openly, unguarded. Typical old-timer, spinning tall tales. Harold didn't reply. From his jacket, he drew a small item the photo Clara had held and placed it on the table beside the tarnished metal tag. Left exposed, the TSA agent glanced at it, uninterested, then flicked his hand, sending the photo sliding to the floor. His boot grazed its edge, a faint rustle tearing through the silence. A small sound, but it shredded memory, no apology, no glance of regret. Harold bent down, retrieving the image, slowly brushing off faint dust. His hands trembled, but this time his eyes no longer rose. A boy, about 12, stood nearby with his mother, watching Harold unblinkingly. He stepped closer, peering at the tag on the table, then looked up, whispering, "Is that real?" Sir Harold nodded. It was all I had, to ensure no one was left behind. The words weren't for the crowd, they sought no applause, but they stilled anyone who heard. At that moment, the airport's chief of security emerged from a distant office. He halted, taking in the scene a silver-haired man, alone amid jeers, beside a trampled photo and a metal tag discarded like trash. He approached, picking up the tag, his eyes scanning the faded inscription. He turned to the young agent who'd knocked the photo down, who said this was fake. His voice, low but icy, cut through. No one answered, no one dared. But the worst had happened. Dignity lay crushed, and honor rested silently on the table in the form of a small metal tag, cold, mute, like the battles it had endured. The airport loudspeaker crackled, announcing a flight from San Diego had landed, but no one listened. Every eye remained fixed on the silver-haired man standing silent in the security checkpoint amid whispers, amid a heavy silence spreading like ink in water. Then, unexpectedly, a group emerged from Gate 5. No luggage, no check-in. They strode through security as if summoned, combat fatigues, U.S. Marine Corps insignias stitched on their chests. 4 young Marines led, eyes stern. Behind them, A tall man with salt and pepper hair, a colonel's rank pinned to his shoulders. He carried nothing save one thing at his collar, a tarnished silver medal, its inscription worn. Clara stepped forward to explain, but he raised a hand, gentle, firm, as if to say, "I know." He approached, quietly lifting the metal tag left discarded on the table. His eyes lingered on its faded engraving. A long pause. Then he turned, walking slowly toward Harold, the man just mocked, filmed, and insulted by the crowd. And suddenly, he stood at attention. He saluted. No music, no light, no announcer, just a gesture sharp, weighty as history itself. The air froze. Those laughing stepped back. Phones recording dropped silently. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the colonel's voice rang out, deep and steady. "This man saved my life." No one reacted, stunned. He didn't need belief. He continued, eyes locked on Harold Fallujah, November 2004. "I was trapped in a crater, blood blinding me. No one came back. But he did, alone. No rifle, no armor, just a med kit, and one promise: I don't leave men behind." The story was brief, but it outweighed every unspoken defense Harold never gave. The chief of security bowed his head. Clara stood frozen, eyes welling. A child clutched her mother's hand, whispering. Why were they yelling at him before her mother didn't answer? Only gripped her hand tighter, staring at the man the airport had scorned minutes ago, now saluted like a commander returning from the front. Behind the security checkpoint, a small room was hastily repurposed to shield him from the crowd's gaze. No press, no cushioned chairs, just cold white light on bare walls, and a silence as deep as a buried memory. Colonel William Rourke sat across from Harold Easton, still holding the metal tag he'd saluted moments before. No one rushed to speak. In that room, the past weighed heavier than any words could bear. William's voice was low, deliberate, as if each word was distilled from days when survival wasn't certain. "I still hear the blast that deafened me, trapped in a crater, legs broken, radio dead. No one heard my calls. They thought I was gone." His eyes met Harold's. "But you came back. You didn't know my name, didn't know if I was alive, yet you came, through gunfire, with a med kit and bare hands. On your shoulders, a bleeding officer, whose name you hadn't even learned." Harold didn't reply. He frowned slightly, then nodded faintly. "I remember. You said something, but I couldn't hear it." William gave a soft, choked laugh. "I said, if I survive, I'll find you." A pause. "It took 18 years, but I found you." Clara stood nearby, no longer just a TSA agent, but a witness to something greater than her job. She opened her phone, searching Harold Eastman. Sparse results. A simple veteran record. Service in Iraq. 2nd Tactical Medical Battalion. Nominated for the Silver Star. But under medals, received one word. Declined. She looked at him, whispering, "You refused a medal." Harold nodded almost imperceptibly. "My unit lost 2 men that day. I couldn't take something. They didn't live to share." The room fell silent again, a deeper silence, like gratitude too vast for words. A young Marine from the colonel's group pulled a notebook from his pocket, flipping to the last page. He held it out. "The last man I trained with before deployment was you. Your words, I never forgot." He pointed to a scrawled line. "Do what's right. No one needs to know." Harold leaned back, his eyes softening. No longer guarded, no longer distant. "I never thought I'd be remembered. I just passed through, so others could live long enough to do what they wanted." No one spoke further, no need. In that room. Harold's identity wasn't in a badge or file. It was in memory, in scars others bore, in the hearts of those he'd carried through war, with gaunt hands, steadier than any oath sworn aloud. A week later, in the main concourse of Denver International Airport, a subtle change went unnoticed by most. Besides the security checkpoint where chaos had erupted days before a simple wooden chair stood, no barriers, no ribbon cutting, no ceremony, just a humble seat, and a small brass plaque affixed to its backrest. The inscription, etched in fine lines, was enough to stop anyone who paused to read, and ensure they'd never walk away the same. To the one who walked quietly through fire so others could come home. Below it, a name, unadorned by rank or title, Harold Easton. No one said he'd asked for it. No one knew who'd placed the chair there. But from that day, someone lingered by it daily. An airport worker set a steaming coffee cup on its seat before moving on. A young soldier removed his cap, stood at attention, and saluted. A boy stopped, whispering softly, "I told my whole class about you." "Sir." No one taught him to do it, he just knew. And Harold. He'd returned home, to a small house in Boulder, where he lived with 3 stray dogs he'd rescued and tended a tiny backyard garden. With hands that had saved countless lives in war, he now quietly weeded, pruned, and watered tomato plants as if every survivor deserved cherishing. He didn't speak of the airport incident, declined TV interviews. When reporters knocked, he smiled, shaking his head. That story isn't for telling, it's for remembering. Clara, the young TSA agent who first read his tag's inscription, hung a replica behind her counter. Beneath it, she scrawled, "Don't assume. Some medals carry history." Not all who passed understood, but those who did never forgot. Sometimes the smallest, coldest, unglamorous things hold an entire chapter of history the world hasn't voiced aloud. Harold Easton never demanded to be remembered. But through silence, through courage that needed no spotlight, he made it impossible to forget. Some heroes no longer wear uniforms, yet they lead, they carry, and they remain, worthy of being seen. If you believe silent heroes like Harold deserve to be remembered, share this story. Let us not forget them, though they never asked. Subscribe to our channel, enable notifications, and leave a comment below to show us you still believe in kindness, honor, and stories worth retelling.